Hey, everybody. My name is Daniel, and I'm the communications pastor here and also a worship leader. And we've been in a great series called Essential: What Matters Most Now. And worship and experiencing God has been a huge value in this house for 40 plus years, also in the Vineyard movement. So, really excited to have our worship pastor with us, Kyle Howard, who's been leading since a wee little boy
Long
in
time.
middle school. Yep.
Very little.
And also Susan, a longtime worship leader, been leading 20 years or so.
Yep, that's right.
And just so excited to just hear from your experience and how God has helped you understand worship and experiencing God and how crucial it is. So I just wanted to ask you all a few questions about, and the first one is, how has worship and your experience with God become crucial to you in your life? Like something that you know you can't live without.
That's good.
That's good. I think really even breaking down just the word worship is actually like really huge. I think worship is like not necessarily a word that gets used a lot outside of church, but when you actually look at the word worship, it's actually like a really intense word. And to worship something is actually like super, just a really serious thing. And I think we worship things like people can worship Jesus, but people could worship sports, they could worship TV,
Yeah.
just all kinds of materialistic things. And worshiping Jesus is like such a real and special thing. And I think for me, it's been crucial because worship is the way I like came in touch and realized that God, a relationship with God, like worship is an interaction. It's like God inhabits the praises of his people. It's not he's sitting up on a big chair in heaven and he's like, oh yeah, they're worshiping me, like that kind of thing. It's like, oh, like this is to be inhabit something is to dwell in, to live in, to make a home in. And it's like
Yeah,
actually
that's
like
good.
a relationship. And so it's not just this, I'm going to worship and I'm going to worship just to check it off, but it's like I worship and I experience him. And when I experience him, I experience the fruit of his presence, and the fruit of his presence is joy and peace and all these amazing things. And I think worship is such a thing that can always bring us back. I think like it's like things could be going so crazy and life can be so chaotic, but worship is that thing where it just brings everything back into focus. And when we just focus in on his presence and we just focus in on who he is, everything just becomes easier, everything becomes more clear, and it's like, why wasn't I doing this the whole time, that kind of thing. So I think that's like in a gist probably the main thing that's been just the most crucial part about worship for me is like it's just opened my eyes to see that God isn't just this God that's like we worship just to maybe get a glimpse of his attention. It's just like this is a relationship. This is an interactional thing that we're doing. It's not just a show up on Sunday and just lift our hands, that kind of thing. So yeah.
That's really good, Kyle. What about
That's
you,
really good.
Susan?
Yeah, so just to kind of go off of that, I have had the privilege to grow up in a home where worship and, time with Jesus was a really high value. And so I'm really, really thankful for that. And I think it just created this foundation in me that I've, all these years of loving Jesus, like without it, I'm just like, where's Jesus? Where's he at? Where's he at? It's kind of like what you're talking about. It's just this connection, this life giving source. I even look at it as like a safe haven, a place where I could just run to. It's not like you're you're trying to run away from life, but you're trying to run to something, and that's to Jesus. And I think what you said was so good that it just refocuses your life. And for me, it's an anchor. It literally puts the anchor down for me when I spend time in worship. And I'm talking, personal worship, personal time with Jesus, not on the stage. There's just this life giving, time that is just irreplaceable. It's just irreplaceable. So, yeah.
That's really good. Like it's good that you both are mentioning this personal time with Jesus and that how crucial that is. Like to cultivate that, just to actually give intention to that time. But on the other side, there is such a joy in gathering together and the community coming together and worshiping. And so, why do you think it's important? Why is it important to you all to gather together to worship God? And then maybe even a follow up. is what do you? I mean, you're worship leaders, right? So you're helping look out and go, what are you doing, God? Like, what do you hope happens
Right.
when we gather together? So any of you could answer
Yeah.
either of those.
You go.
y-
Yeah.
well, I think you hitting on the personal worship is so important. But I think, as you guys all know, like gathering together as a body is like such a special experience, and I think when we worship and the Spirit of God is moving, those are the environments where I think anything is possible. Like anything can happen, and I think in those moments when heaven invades earth, we're actually getting heaven's perspective. Like, so when we have heaven's perspective, we lose. We have like we don't worry about anxiety. Like we're not worrying about our bills. We're not worried about relationships. Like we have heaven's perspective, and so even in heaven's perspective, everything's just easier. Everything's lighter. It's like everything just makes sense here, and so I think there's that part of it, and I also think just even the simplicity just of the whole unity side. Like I think it's super special when a huge body of people can gather just to lift up just one thing in particular, even like 1,000 people getting together for the protest. Like whether you believe it or not, all those people were united for one thing.
Yes.
And so
Yeah,
when you,
that's really good.
you unite here and you're all lifting up the same thing, I don't actually think God can help himself but be like, wow, that pleases my heart, and I love it so much to see my kids getting along and just worshiping and all lifting up the same thing, and he just can't help himself but to just release his presence and to release joy and release his spirit and his peace and everything. So and then your follow-up, just I think when I lead worship, my goal I think is just for people to experience God just as a father. I think just the orphan spirit in our day, whether you know what the orphan spirit is or not, like if you don't know what church is, like it's so huge. People don't know who they are. And so in a room, I think one of my goals, one of the things I'm thinking about is just that people would hear his voice. People would sense, even if they don't know what they're sensing, it's the Holy Spirit, but just in those moments that they would be like, it just like it brings tears to their eyes because they're like, what is this? Like something, I can feel that something cares about me. Like I can feel love, and I can feel supernatural peace. Like, what is that? It's making me cry. Like, and in those moments, I think is where it's like, those are starting like pivotal moments where it's like, it just sends people on a track to just want to know more about what that was. And then, obviously on that track, they learn who they are, they learn who he is. And so I would just say just learning themselves as sons and daughters of Jesus is
That's
probably a
really
goal.
good,
Yeah.
Kyle.
Yeah,
How about
I love
you,
it.
Susan?
Yeah, I just kind of thinking about the power in worship and just gathering together. And you touched on it. One of the biggest fruits of gathering together is unity, and that is a really, really high value for me in worship. That's the Father's heart. And so we have this opportunity as worshipers and as worship leaders to connect people to heaven. And you mentioned bringing heaven to earth. And so, I mean, as we all know, we're living in a really difficult season, as a church, as a nation, as a world. And we have this opportunity, to take a stand with worship. I feel like the enemy's voice is very loud right now, and there are lies that are being spoken by him that people are believing. And you kind of touched on that about, our identity, and there's so many other lies. And I think that worship actually silences the enemy. The enemy hates worship. And so I think, when we take that bold step as a church in unity and in faith, we are silencing the enemy and we are shifting the atmosphere. So the places that were dark are now in the light. The hearts that were in the dark are now in the light. Minds that were in depression are now set free. I mean, you even touched on that a little bit. That is just just to dive into the follow-up question, as a worship leader, like that is my heart's cry. I think of every worship leader is that people would encounter Jesus to the point of transformation, where their hearts are set free, their minds are set free. I think anything of all the years that I've led worship and grown, it's just like if anything less than that is literally noise to me, and it's just a performance. And so I think, I love that this house values worship and spirit filled worship, and the powerful worship. And so I'm just so grateful that, we value that. So, yeah.
That's really good. If there was one thing, and maybe just one of you answer this as we kind of close down, is there's one thing you could encourage, those of you watching to just press into one simple way to press in to worship and experiencing God more. Is there an encouragement that either of you would have just to help us engage more during this time?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Mary.
You want me to? Okay.
Go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think for us it's easy because we're musical and we're musicians, and we play instruments, and so we're like, oh yeah, we can go worship. But there's a lot of you who don't, and maybe can't even carry a tune. And you know what? It doesn't matter. I would actually strongly encourage people to put on worship music, to put uplifting music on, and just spend time, just worshiping Him in your room, or in your car, because I think that that's going to shift something inside of you, and it's going to release something inside of you probably that maybe you didn't even know needed to be released in a good way. So that's one way. So
I gotta
yeah.
touch on too. Like, I would say too, just in the simplest way, on your way to work in your car or wherever you're going, take 5 minutes and put on any worship song, and reflect on your life. And even if you don't know Jesus, reflect on your life and look back and see where there has been provision, where there's been a breakthrough in something, and just start to reflect on those moments. And then once you've done that for half the time, just ask the Lord, what do you think about me? What do you say about me? And you'll start to cultivate this thing, and it's actually getting to worship. Because then once you reflect on those two things and you ask Him, then I don't think you're going to be able to help yourself but to say what He is to you. So I think that would be just a simple encouragement.
That's really, really helpful and really practical. And, so we just want to bless you all and encourage you this week to really press in. And it's reminding me what you two are, suggesting and challenging, encouraging us with is the two questions. I think Happy often mentions this: who is God and who are we? We're always asking those questions. And it's like in worship, that's where you discover. It's like the veil that's there is like, it's
That's
taken
good.
away, and you can interact, and you get to say, oh, this is who you really are, Lord,
Right.
and this is who I really am. And so
It's
we
huge.
just bless you,
Yes.
and excited to see what Jesus does in and through your life. See you later.